of a bitch! Yes! America's Evil Genius here, and I'm doing pretty much what most of you are doing right now. I'm celebrating. This is one of the great days to be an American. One of the proudest days I think that any of us have had in our nation as a lifetime. Osama Bin Laden is dead. Is put in the ground or wherever where he needs to be, and justice has been served on his worthless carcass. So just truly, words can't describe what a wonderful day this is on all levels, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. I tape this on Monday evening, so we're less than 24 hours after the news came down, so we'll talk about that a little bit today. First of all, some minor housekeeping. Yes, first of all, I know I have promised you an analysis of Herman Cain and his presidential bid, and I'm not going to put that off any further. You're going to get kind of a double dose this week. I know that I ordinarily release one of these presentations a week. You're going to get two of them this week. I've been wanting to do this Herman Cain analysis, but we just keep getting these news stories that we have to talk about, and that's the thing when you're doing opinion pieces and you're doing commentary and current events. Sometimes you get a huge story that you just have to move everything back in order to cover it, and that's what we're doing here. But that being said, I know I promised you Herman Cain for a couple of weeks, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do this presentation tonight on the Bin Laden issue and the political fallout from it. And as soon as I get it produced and edited and whatever and get it put up on YouTube, I'm immediately going to then take the Herman Cain piece, and then hopefully we'll turn that right around as well. And hopefully by maybe Wednesday or Thursday, we'll get the Cain piece out there. So you're going to get two episodes of America's Evil Genius this week, and we're going to get caught up that way. So that's the housekeeping. And also, the Bruins jersey still on. Hey, the Bruins beat the Montreal Canadiens, and so I suppose it's a superstition. I'll be wearing this so long as the Bruins playoff bid goes on. So hey, happiness all around, I suppose. So in talking about the Bin Laden episode and all of the wonderful news that we heard late last night, we got to give some credit out. We got to give some kudos out. First of all, to the military. It never ceases to amaze me what America's military can do. And I know we always talk about the sacrifice that military people and their families make, and your words cannot do that justice what they go through. And everybody says that, but I think everybody means it, and I certainly mean it. But in addition to thanking them and their families for that dedication, you know, we talk about that so much and what they and their families go through that I think sometimes we forget. In addition to that dedication that they show, we forget just how darn good these people are at their jobs. We forget how well trained they are and just how precise they are in what they're doing. And when you, on occasion, sit back and think about that and think about what these people do in their missions and how well they do it, it just puts you in awe. I mean, I heard about this mission today, and I think I heard somewhere they had around like 40 minutes to go get Bin Laden and kill him and get some computers out of there and get what they could. And, you know, it was just so much precision there and so little room for error. And that's exactly what the military does day in and day out in Afghanistan and Iraq and wherever they are. There's, very simply put, there's not a better trained fighting force on the planet. And my hat's off to them. I know we say it so often, but when you really think about what they do, to those of us who have never been in the military, it's absolutely amazing. And it's jaw-dropping. And it's awe-inspiring. Most of us can't even conceive of performing at that high of a level, under that much pressure, with that much precision. It's the epitome of what the human race can accomplish. It really is. So, man, I just can't say enough about the admiration that I have, and I know that all of you have, for the American military. If you're in the military and you're watching this thing, and especially if you were in Afghanistan or Iraq, but wherever you served, man, well done. I mean, I can't say enough about you. Hell of a job. Also, I want to give a lot of credit out to the administration of George W. Bush. They set the stage for this in the early going, right after 9/11, and they made it clear that we were going to find those who perpetrated those heinous acts and those who have spread this anti-Western and anti-American philosophy through the Middle East, and we were going to bring them to justice. And they really set the table for that, set the stage for that. They did get Saddam Hussein, and I believe they set a lot of the stage for getting getting Osama Bin Laden. So again, well done in terms of leadership for George W. Bush. And I know it wasn't easy. I know that it was a time where, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but it was a time where, the American public didn't always understand exactly what we were doing or why we were doing it. And there were voices out there that were intentionally trying to dissuade the public from supporting what was necessary. And Bush and his administration stayed the course. And the proof is in the pudding today that was the right thing to do. And my hat's off to George W. Bush. It's a lot. There are things about Bush I don't like politically, and I've talked about that before. But on this issue, he was spot on. He was right, and mission accomplished. And also, there's some credit that has to go to the Obama administration as well. And you guys know I'm no fan of Barack Obama, but on this issue, on this day, I have to say, job well done. I mean, when you look again at the type of mission this was, and the gutsy kind of mission it was, this was not easy. This took a lot of planning and a lot of precision, and there was a lot of risk there. And that type of mission, it had to be approved all the way up the chain. And so to have the guts to do it, to pull it off, to execute it, you have to give credit not only to those who did it, but all of those in the chain of command, that approved it and that gave the word to go forward with it. And yes, that does go all the way up to and including the commander-in-chief. I've got to tell you this, as I sit here, and we talk about politics a lot, and all of the differences in the two sides, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here shortly, but if we set all that aside for a moment, if you would have told me, if you would have set me aside on September 12, 2001, right after everything happened on 9/11, and you would have told me that within 10 years, Saddam Hussein would be dead and Osama Bin Laden would be dead, I would say, well done. I might have questioned you a little bit about the time frame. 10 years, that's a little bit long, isn't it? Can we do it in 5, 3, 1 year? But in any case, I think we all understood, even in those early days, that getting rid of Hussein, getting rid of Bin Laden was critical to really making our world a safer place. That is not to say that this ends the war on terror, the war on Middle Eastern culture. It doesn't mean that doesn't mean by any stretch that the threat is not there anymore. It certainly is, but this is a key component, and my hat's off to everybody involved. So. With all of that out of the way, we will go ahead and talk a little bit about the political fallout of this. And and I know. When I say that, a lot of you are looking into the screen there and saying, "I can't believe you're politicizing this, and it's too early, and you're a political hack." Relax for a second. Just relax for a minute. I am as uncomfortable as you likely are with the process or the idea of politicizing this event. I think there's a lot of credit to go all the way around on this thing. I think that it's a real testament to what America can do when we're unified in what we want to do and when we're all on the same page. And so, at the start of the day, you wouldn't think of it as a type of thing that would be politicized. But I think that we are all adult enough and we are all mature enough and we are all aware enough of our political environment to understand that at some point this event is going to be politicized. Now, we might not like that. That might make us a little bit uncomfortable, maybe make us a lot uncomfortable. But I think if we're all brutally honest with ourselves and we look at the political landscape around us, I think we all do understand that this is going to happen. That at some point down the line, there will be a political issue or a political debate that arises in some form out of this. We can decry that all we want to. We can complain about that all we want to. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change anything. This will become a political issue of some sort. Indeed, any sitting president who had this accomplishment on their mantelpiece, and a sitting president who will be running for re-election, common sense would dictate that that sitting president would use in some way this accomplishment as something to point to use in their upcoming presidential re-election campaign. I don't think any of us would be shocked to see that. I don't think any of us would be surprised to see that, and I really don't think any of us would criticize that on the face of it. So, doesn't matter who the president is or what the political party is, if you take out one of the world's most dangerous men and one of your top enemies in your first term, you can't be blamed, really, for pointing to that when it comes time for re-election for your second. So, that being said, I think that it's a no-brainer that this will come up in the 2012 presidential campaign, the accomplishment that it was, and so we need to be aware of that. And I think that it's not too soon for us to kind of prepare for that, those of us who are on the right and who will be opposing Obama next year. So, if we're going to talk today, even though some might say it's a little bit too early, it is going to happen, so we need to go ahead and start thinking about it. How should we react? How should those of us on the right react? Well, I'll tell you what I think. As long as the Obama administration consistently tells the entire story about this thing, you know what? I don't really have a problem. And indeed, in the early going, they've done just that. When you look at the press conferences last night and Obama being magnanimous and paying some tributes to George W. Bush, who, again, really got this thing going, and it was really his policies and his type of action that really got this to come to fruition. Obama really was magnanimous in that. Now, time will tell if he will remain that way, but I hope he does. But the point being, there is a lot of credit to go around here. I will be honest and tell you that I think most of the credit, if you're going to apply credit to a political party, most of the credit for this should go to the Republican Party, but there's a certain level of it that should go to the Democratic Party as well. So, as long as the Obama administration continues to frame this within the context of bipartisanship, and that this is a great example of what true bipartisanship can accomplish, hey, no harm, no foul. I've got no problem with that. However, there is the possibility, and let me stress that this has not happened yet as far as I've seen, but the potential during the upcoming campaign is there, if the Obama administration chooses to go the route of claiming full credit for this. If they choose to go the route of saying, hey, what Bush was doing didn't work, so I had to come in and change what we were doing, and that got Bin Laden, then there's going to be a problem. Because at that point, we would have to take the credit that we deserve. Let's go back in time and think this through. Back when we first started talking about military action after 9/11 in Iraq and in Afghanistan, Bush was pursuing that pretty hard, as we all remember. And I supported it then, I supported it now. And during that time, and as those wars went on, the Democratic Party, and Barack Obama in particular, spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of resources, misplacing the focus of our country when we needed our focus to be on Hussein and Bin Laden and the Middle East. Consistently, you can say, whether you like it or not, consistently, you can say that the Republican Party has had these wars as a #1 priority from day one. And that's been consistent during the Bush administration and even through now, even through today. But yet, while we always had the focus in the right place, it was the Democratic Party who wasted a lot of time worrying about Abu Ghraib. It was a Democratic Party that wasted a lot of time worrying about torture and waterboarding. It was a Democratic Party that waste a lot of time worrying about if we were discriminating against Muslims, or worrying if, Juan Williams or someone looked twice at a Muslim when they saw him in an airport. It was the Democratic Party that wasted a lot of time criticizing regular Americans, such as you and I, for daring to be vigilant and look twice at someone if we thought that they might be a threat. It was the Democratic Party that wasted a lot of effort and wasted a lot of time proposing budgets and bills that would reduce funding to the military. So if you look back at it, throughout this entire 10-year ordeal, every hiccup, every hurdle that has been placed in front of those of us who were singularly focused on bringing the Middle East to justice, every hurdle was placed by the Democratic Party. And a lot of those hurdles were placed by Barack Obama, his own self. Go back to when he was a senator. When it came time for military action in Iraq, he was one of the few Democrats at the time that opposed it. Even then, the Democratic Party for the last several years has been very against, or a lot of them have been very against any kind of military action, but there was a time, lest we forget, right after 9/11 that they were right in support with us as far as going into Iraq. But Obama, he was the fly in the ointment. He was against it from day one. Shoes on the other foot now, isn't it? So I'm not saying that necessarily to bash anybody. I'm sure it comes off that way. But just to remind ourselves of the entire picture of what we've dealt with for the last 10 years. Yes, our enemies in the Middle East have made it a rough go for us, but our enemies at home certainly didn't help things either. So we need to keep that in mind if and when the Democratic Party tries to take credit for this. But the interesting thing happened, as much as Obama opposed our military action and questioned it, and was right in line with all those people that thought that violence wasn't the answer, when he attained the presidency, he switched his tune a little bit. Not verbally, he still said the same garbage he was saying, when he was in the Senate, but action-wise, he still went after Bin Laden. He went into Afghanistan, and he knew that if this thing went downhill on his watch, it would be the end of the Democratic Party. So he did bite the bullet, so to speak, and go forward with what Bush was doing. And keep in mind, Obama said a lot of things during his campaign about changing how we were going to approach these wars, and how we were going to close Gitmo and stop the torture and all of these different things. But when you look at it, he really didn't do any of those things. He didn't close Gitmo, didn't make any significant changes in how we interrogate people. And don't get me wrong, I applaud him for staying the course. I applaud him for not doing so. I think that staying with the Bush policies as he did was one of the prime reasons that Bin Laden is dead today. So for that I say well done. Frankly, Bush had the lead on this, and Obama was smart enough or pragmatic enough at some point to follow that lead, and it worked. But that also says that we can never allow him to rewrite history, if you will, and claim that this was all of his own doing. It was not. He followed through on the policies of Bush. He realized in some way that he could not close Gitmo, that would be a horrible thing to do. He realized that he had to fight this war the way we were fighting it, and it came to fruition, and we won. But I think we need to remember who set up the game plan, and that it was Obama that followed it, which there's no shame in that, but there's also not much in the way of credit he can take for it either, in terms of creating a game plan and creating, the mentality of what we were going to do. He didn't do that. Not that he should have. Bush was right on this. Obama followed him, and Bin Laden's dead. Hey, we're in a good position. In fact, the other day, before Bin Laden was captured, I remember reading a story, and I forget who wrote it, but someone wrote an opinion piece in one of the big newspapers that Obama is a moderate Republican, and which he's not, but that was the terminology they were using. And one of the big reasons they put out there was that we're involved in 3 wars, and he said he was going to stop the wars and all this, and he really didn't do it. Well, that's true. I wouldn't call him a moderate Republican, but he didn't stop the wars because he knew he couldn't. He knew that for all of the talk of going forward in peace, for some reason he understood that that wasn't possible, at least not at this point in history. Now, whether he was talking about peace during the campaign just to get elected, or whether he legitimately believed it, and then once he got into the White House and saw the gravity of the situation around him, he had to change his tune, or whether he was just being pragmatic enough to be reelected, who knows? We don't know. We'll probably never know. It doesn't matter, really, because Bin Laden's dead, and that's exactly what we wanted. So, however we got there, I'm not real concerned about. But I just want us on the right to make sure that we keep them honest, and that we make sure that the history books reflect the accurate portrayal of what happened. That the correct credit is given due for George W. Bush and his leadership, and credit given due to Barack Obama for following that lead and continuing on with Bush's wartime policies, because it worked. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about real briefly that's a lesson we can learn from this. And this next thing I'm going to talk about really isn't Democrat versus Republican in nature, really isn't conservative versus liberal in nature. It's more of something pointed strictly at the youth of America. Are there lessons that the youth of America can learn from this? And I think there are. We talked a few weeks ago about what's wrong with the youth of America and all of the ways they've been raised, and we've screwed up the way we've raised them, and how misguided they've been, and they really don't understand the real world. I think that this is a teachable moment for the youth of America. One of the scariest things to me is that so many of the youth, and I'm not even pointing at a political party here, I'm just saying so many of the youth in general seem to think that violence and war is never an answer. So many of them you hear say, well, get out of Afghanistan, get out of Iraq, get out of Libya. We need to bring everybody home. And it's not just the Democratic youth. I mean, they're kind of the most vociferous about it. There's where most of your anti-war protesters are. But on the other side of the aisle, there's a lot of younger Republicans, a lot of younger conservatives, many of them coming from the libertarian philosophy. Many of them are kind of the stereotypical Ron Paul supporters. And they also believe that America really shouldn't be involved militarily unless we are directly attacked. So there's a commonality there that both of those groups probably don't realize they have. They actually have something in common. But I think this is a point in history where we can look at the youth and impress upon them that this case shows that, you know what, sometimes violence really is the answer. Sometimes war really is necessary. I mean, think about it. All the sanctions in the world, all the diplomacy in the world, all the UN resolutions in the world never would have stopped Osama Bin Laden. It wasn't going to have one dime's worth of effect on him. And likewise for Saddam Hussein, who flouted UN resolutions and who thumbed his nose at the international community. Sometimes the only answer for dealing with an enemy is to blow their head clean off. Now, I know that sounds a little blunt, but I think the youth need to hear that because they've been brainwashed through their schooling, through Hollywood, through the media, to think that the world can live together peaceably, and that's just the natural state of things. It's anything but. If you look at world history, it shows that small windows of peace that we experience at times can only happen through war. That peace is not the default setting for human beings. It just doesn't work out that way. I know we'd like it to, but the reality is that it doesn't. And I see all these, kids going around with these t-shirts with peace signs on them, and you see bumper stickers and necklaces and chains and so forth, and I know a lot of times that kids will wear clothing and wear things that they don't truly understand just because it's fashionable or cool or hip or whatever, but it really pains me and it really makes me sad when I see all these peace signs that these kids are wearing, because it tells me they don't understand. They don't understand that there are times, there are cases where peace is not the answer. There are times where peace kills. And this was a point in history that was one of those times. The last 10 years was one of those periods in history where peace would have killed us. We did the right thing as a nation. Our leaders, George W. Bush and Barack Obama, did the right thing as well. And I hope our youth, I hope our children will understand that there are times where you have to stand up and fight. That there are times when the only answer is to put a bullet in the head of your enemy. I know the schools aren't teaching them that. I know Hollywood isn't teaching them that. But I hope that this situation will shock them back to reality. To let them know that peace does not happen through diplomacy. Peace does not happen through understanding. Peace does not happen through any sort of multiculturalism or any sort of high-minded academic plan. Peace occurs through superior firepower. Period. That is a lesson I hope they take from this. So a lot of things to think about. A great day for America. I'll be back with you just in a couple of days as we talk about Herman Cain and how he fits in to the presidency in 2012. I'm America's evil genius, and God bless America.